interstices and the interaction of art with the environment for a number of years. Robyn's from New South Wales originally. We don't hold that against her here. We're happy to have representatives from all geographic areas, despite what form of rugby league they might play. Robyn got her PhD at the University of Tasmania, and then she's been here for quite a while. She's had more than 40 exhibits, open exhibits for her work, and I can tell you, the brother is an artist. That's an incredible number, and really signs a very successful professional artist. Anyway, without further ado, Robyn, thank you.
So I acknowledge the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first inhabitants of this country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and elders past and present on the land on which we stand today. The Jabberkai, the Irukandji and the Gumiyindi people. In the spirit of reconciliation, I also acknowledge the valuable contribution the Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples continue to make to James Cook University and the broader community. And on screen we have an image of the migrating whale Jitterer, exhibited in the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco and created by Indigenous artists under the leadership of Sue Ryan, the Ghost Nets art coordinator. So Sue is a resident of North Queensland, and Jitterer was created in South Australia using discarded nets that had floated in the sea and had washed up on the coast. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present my research involving my art and the work I've done in terms of climate communication and how both might reel in this disaster. We have the dual disasters of climate change and the problem of entrapment in a social and cultural system that needs repair. So the themes I'm going to discuss are how art can represent the essence and import of scientific knowledge through works of art, how individual artists can raise awareness of climate change and environmental pollution, and how this might impact the community, the nation, and hopefully the world, and evidence for the efficacy of the arts to foster understanding and sustainable behaviour. So most of my works of art respond to the impact and drama of the facts, data and predictions established in the scientists. And this is evident in And No Eggs Hatched, made from resin and plastic waste. So as many of you would know, scientists predicted 50 years ago that it was unlikely that any marine birds would remain uncontaminated by synthetic pollutants. Today, 90% of marine bird species have been impacted by plastic ingestion or entanglement, and 95% of the individuals within these species have been affected. So this work illustrates how artists employ symbolism and emotion to disseminate and heighten messaging. It's actually a work that I find to be upsetting. So in this presentation, I'm going to adopt John Bellamy Foster's view that science and art are two of the preeminent fields of inquiry into nature, with each operating according to its own distinct principles. In my work, as is the case of many environmental artists, poets and writers, subjective reaction to living in a time of climate change is grits to the mill. Indeed, it's not only what I feel, but what we feel that artists, poets and writers can articulate. This capacity to contribute to understanding was recognised by Nelson Goodwin, who wrote, "The arts must be taken no less seriously than the sciences as modes of discovery, creation and enlargement of knowledge, and in the broad sense, the advancement of understanding." So, in many environmental works of art, information established in the science provides the impetus or starting point for the work. And this indicates the value of combining disparate ways of working in the world and points to how, hand in hand, we might reel in this disaster. In terms of climate change messaging, the arts can help us consider how to think, feel and act in relation to a changing world. Indeed, as Graham wrote, if serious art enriches human understanding, it makes it relatively easy to explain the place of the arts in our culture and our educational institutions. And Paul Ehrlich wrote, it's human behaviour to one another, towards the planet, and that sustains us all, that requires rapid modification. Therefore, changing human behaviour is a clarion call. And in this choke series of work, I'm suggesting that we're actually choking on plastic that was discarded and floated in the sea, with children's toys, plastic tops and rope that was washed up on the beach. As well as choking on plastics, these works might suggest a breastplate and indicate our collective shame in relation to petrochemical plastic pollution. So as many of you would be aware of the 8.3 billion metric tonnes of plastic that's ever been produced, only 9% has been recycled, 12% incinerated and 79% resides in landfill or the environment. One necklace is made from a piece of compressed plastic. So this is similar to a sedimentary rock. However, in this material, layers of plastic have been laid down and compressed by the weight of water, possibly in a port, creating a sedimentary plastic layer. Who knows, our legacy of our time might be a plastic carpet covering the land and the seabeds. So much of the plastic waste used in my work was purchased from Tangaroa Blue, an Australian-wide and international marine debris organisation who work with volunteers to remove loads of rubbish from the coast. And here, the piece Coast, made from 330 discarded cigarette lighters from all over the world that were washed up on Queensland beaches, suggests perhaps that our beaches are sullied and tarnished by plastic pollution, rather than being pristine places to swim and have fun. And when this piece of work was hung in Umbrella Gallery in Council earlier this year, a visitor was almost brought to tears. So for people with a sense of pride of our sunburnt country, this work might tug at the heartstrings. So, as you can see, works of art are rarely didactic renditions of facts. Instead, artists find poetic ways and sensuous images to reveal meaning. And the British art theorist R.G. Collingwood contends that artists are motivated by a psychic disturbance, and by making works of art, they can identify the underlying emotion. In the process and in effective works of art, the underlying emotion is encapsulated in the work, and it can be decoded and recreated in the mind of the viewer. So, the arts and humanities are recognised by climate communication researchers and environmental psychologists as being effective, compelling and novel forms of communication regarding information established in the sciences due to the use of visual form, narrative and metaphor, cognitive, emotive and moral stimulation, engaging imagination, cultural sensitivity, the ability to normalise change, and the capacity to transform a problem focus to a personalised solution scenario. Epstein has argued that experiential knowledge gained from viewing art is more compelling and more likely to influence behaviour than abstract knowledge. So here, hangs to Hulu, Crossing the Tide, exhibited in the Venice Biennale in 2015, presented us with two pools and a path between the pools. When people walk across the pool, the path sinks and the water approaches your feet. It's a terrifying experience, and yet this is what the people of island nations such as Tuvalu would experience each day due to fear of inundation by rising sea levels. So this work illustrates how artists use metaphor to highlight situations and circumstances The work is not an island that's being inundated by water. However, it evokes the experience, the understanding, and the emotion. As Graham reports, art enhances our understanding by providing us with images and perspectives through which experiences may be seen afresh. So in this horrific age of plastic, I've suggested that time is measured in a currency of plastic pollution, as indicated in the piece called Plastic Time. And it is of concern that it takes millions of years for crude oil to form in the ground. Oil can be pumped from the ground and shipped to refineries in a few days and made into plastic knives, forks and straws in a few more days. 50% of all plastic products are used once before they're discarded. Petrochemical plastics are virtually indestructible, and these plastics don't decompose. Instead, over 500 to 1,000 years, they break up into smaller and smaller pieces. Therefore, it takes millions of years for oil to form in the ground, and yet it can be made into plastic items, which might be used once and thrown away within a few short weeks. And then, as waste, the plastic pollutes the land, air and sea for the next 1,000 years. And despite this, many people continue to dump waste illegally in the sea and use rivers to dump rivers as dumping sites. Rivers carry 70% of ocean plastic to the sea. Not all good news. So, the work of art called Inflated was purchased by the Bailey's Hotel in Cairns and sits at the entrance of the hotel. When turtles eat plastic, they make gas in an attempt to digest the plastic. The gas makes the turtles float to the surface where they bake in the sun, and not being able to dive down for food, they die. So this is Inflated at night. And by drawing people into close contacts with works of environmental art, problems are positioned in the here and now. It is gratifying to see businesses like the Bailey Hotel demonstrating a commitment to environmental sustainability by purchasing and displaying such works. Art theorist Arthur Danto writes of the experience of art as a wakeful dream. Art can engage our intellect and enables people to think about the meaning of the work at their own pace and with reference to their own values. The cultural sensitivity of works of art is noted by climate communicators as the value of messaging through the arts. In the work Sea Smog, the unseen horror of millions of tiny plastic particles circulating under the surface of the water, resembling a fog, is presented. The work was hung in the Cairns Institute here at James Cook University. So art can provide tangible visuals for environmental problems that might otherwise be pushed aside or considered to impact other people in faraway places sometime in the future. Works of art can reduce this geographical and temporal distance and situate issues in the present, the here and now. So the horror of microplastics from car tyres, synthetic clothing and drink bottles that are washed up to into the sea and enter the food chain is represented in Lambton Soup. The work quotes Andy Warhol's famous Campbell Soup's cans of 1962. However, I created a visual for these often unseen pollutants by listing the number of microplastics on the front of each can. It's estimated that we're consuming a plastic credit card of microplastics each week, and the number of microplastics rises if we drink fluids from plastic bottles. In this series of photos, I've used badges at the bottom of the work to tell a narrative of climate change. We've got climate change tipping point, climate change dry, climate change greed, climate change melt, climate change consumption, and climate change walk lightly on the earth. So as you would know, as the climate warms, cyclones are predicted to increase in frequency and strength. In cyclone, we're confronted with the eye of the storm. The work's made from garden materials, nylon and white paint. The warming climate and water caused a severe red toxic algal bloom that devastated the coast of Chile and Argentina in 2016. The piece Red Tide laments the death of millions of fish to the red tide which crippled the fishing industry and the livelihood of the people working in that industry. And in this artwork, I drew dead fish with pastels on a plastic buoy that had washed up on our coast. And here's a gallery view of some of these works that were shown at the Cairns Regional Gallery. And in exhibitions, works coalesce to tell a story, like a chapter in a book. So Disquiet is a work using buoys from the pearling industry that had washed up on our shore. And in the digital print body coral, I've conflated human bodies with the drama of bleached coral to point to human responsibility as the cause of the problem. I've attempted to suggest that the veins in our body are ossified, like the bleached coral, to garner greater concern regarding coral bleaching. At times, I recycle materials in my work. The bleached-looking coral materials I made and used in the piece Exodus had a second life in overconsumption. And in overconsumption made from paper mache, garden materials and paint, I've tried to suggest a container-laden cargo ship typical of those seen transiting along the horizon as we view the coral sea from Cairns. In financial terms, it's cost-effective to import consumer goods to Australia, resulting in many of the 11,000 transits by ships annually through the marine park, despite the risk of damage. The ship is a menacing reminder of the greenhouse gases generated by manufacture, transport and trade, and fuelled by consumption. So greenhouse gases have accumulated in the atmosphere at an accelerating rate that has outstripped the Earth's capacity to adapt and absorb the excess. The gases warm the planet and water, sounding a death knell to the reef. Indeed, Paul Ehrlich has written, overconsumption is central to the deterioration of human life support systems, but is ignored because most business economists, corporate executives and politicians view it as an unalloyed good. And here's my too hot to handle reef distress. And it demonstrates an example of my subversive use of beauty. So this dress was shown at the North Australian Festival of Arts in Town a few months ago. So beauty is a hook to attract attention and enable the delivery of a perturbing message such as coral bleaching. I'm highly influenced by Kant's views of the judgment of taste and the play of morals in such judgment. Kant claims that we cannot appreciate beauty without consideration of morals. To illustrate this, if we see a beautiful man and then we find out that he's killed his 5 children, we may no longer consider him to be beautiful, and we might think that we were mistaken in thinking him to be attractive in the first place. My hope is that we learn more about the plight of all forms of life with whom we share the planet, and that our admiration for nature might activate our moral concern and foster pro-environmental behaviour. So climate communication researchers have found that artists have the capacity to transform a problem focus to a personalised solution scenario. Artists demonstrate their commitment to sustainability through their commitment to making art. And here is Molly Steer, who created the Straws No More campaign. And this is a wonderful example of a young person who has demonstrated a personal commitment to a problem and made a great contribution to reducing plastic waste. Now we come to the final part of this presentation, and I'm going to address the question of evidence. How do we know if environmental works of art foster sustainable behaviours? And the information I'll provide now has been published in a paper titled The Persistence of Plastic, Environmental Public Art and Microplastic Pollution. So when I was thinking about how to create a tangible visual for microplastics, given that they're hard to see in the air, on land and in the sea, I thought that a really terrible idea would be the negative impact of microplastics on offspring and babies. Microplastics found in human embryo was made to raise awareness of the deleterious consequences of plastic pollution for humans and symbolically on all forms of life. The work is made from 1,000 recycled plastic bottles, spray paint and cable ties, and it was hung here in James Cook University on the Cairns Institute building. During the 6 months the work was hanging, and following ethics approval, I conducted an online survey to establish if the work had impacted understanding about microplastic pollution. In a thematic analysis, the following categories were identified: thought-provoking, meaningful, powerful message, and significant urgent environmental issues. Comments included: the scale of the work, coupled with the fact it depicted something microscopic, an embryo, provides a curious juxtaposition, which inspired further thinking about the work and indeed about the impact of microplastics on the future of the planet and humanity. A further theme was challenging, confronting and disturbing, with comments such as, it has certainly raised my awareness of the horrendous side effects of our plastic addiction. That the work of art had been effective in raising awareness of microplastics, with 75% of people who said their understanding of microplastics had changed after viewing the work. One respondent mentioned a behavioural change and wrote, "I think about microplastics more when shopping. It's affected how I shop and I've stopped buying that plastic stuff." When I made the didactic sign, I found to my absolute horror that microplastics could in fact cross the blood-brain barrier and the placenta, causing gene alteration and harm. And here, life resembled art a little too much. Finally, beauty and subtlety were mentioned numerous times, with comments including, "It's beautiful, although it draws attention to a significant environmental issue, and it is thought-provoking. At the same time, it is a beautiful artwork. The colours change throughout the day and it glistens in the morning sun. It's magnificent." So beauty in art, according to Scarry, can encourage a feeling of reverence for something that is greater than us and promote an affinity with nature and the desire to protect the beauty of the world. This can lead to a form of stewardship and the desire to recreate the beauty of the world. In a similar manner, Australian philosopher John Armstrong contends that an experience of beauty involves a kinship between an object and one's soul, supporting the view that beauty in art can promote interconnectedness between people and nature. These concepts of beauty, kinship and stewardship have led climate communicators to advocate for environmental works of art that emphasise the beauty and interconnectedness of nature. And here I've shown one of Australia's premier artists, Janet Lawrence, Deep Breathing, Resuscitation of the Reef. And finally, this is my last slide, and I went to Port Douglas today and I hung the work of art called Spinning Out. It actually rotates. It's made from plastic waste, bamboo, nylon, glue and paint and a mirror. It's on show at the Call of the Running Tide, which opens on Friday night and continues to the 27th of September and features 40 local and national artists' work. So spinning out takes the form of a DNA that's composed of plastic, and I hope that it might contribute to reflection and understanding of the knowledge generated by scientists regarding climate change and environmental pollution. So my greatest hope is that the arts and the scientists can work hand in hand to reel in this disaster. Thank you very much.